Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info. Liverpool playwright Lizzy Nunnery's new play Narvik, directed by Hannah Tyrell-Pinder for Box of Tricks Theatre Company, will open its national tour at Home Manchester at the end of January 2017, following a successful run at Liverpool Playhouse in September 2015. I spoke to Lizzy a couple of weeks before the play's opening and asked her to explain where the idea for the play began. Apologies for a few issues with the sound due to the unpredictable nature of internet telephony.
It began with Hannah Tyrell-Pinder from Box of Tricks asking me if I had any ideas about making a play with music, and she was really keen to bring together the two things that I've done for a long time, playwriting and songwriting. And we really quickly both had an ambition to try and create a piece of theatre that used music in an unusual way, that had a live soundtrack throughout, had musicians on stage throughout. So that was a really exciting challenge for both of us. And I then told her I'd been interested in doing a play inspired by my grandfather's experiences of World War II for quite a long time. Hannah's also really fascinated by the Second World War, so that was the beginning of it, really.
You've done the script, the music and the lyrics, a triple threat.
Yeah, the music's co-written with Vidar Norheim and Martin Heslop, and we developed that soundtrack for the first production, which was September 2015 in Liverpool Playhouse. We did a couple of weeks there. I wrote the lyrics and kind of sketched out the songs and then brought them to Vidar and Martin, and together we created all the wider compositions and arrangements.
But it's billed as a play with songs rather than a musical, so how do the songs actually relate to the script?
We were really fascinated by the relationship between music and memory, and the way that a particular song can bring you back to a moment in your past almost involuntarily. And the play starts with the central character, Jim, age 90, having a fall in his basement. And as he lies there, unable to get up and delirious, his memories start to come back to him. And they come back to him through music, through the songs of his childhood and the songs that Elsa, who he fell in love with in the Second World War, sang to him. So we've really tried to thread the songs through in that way. They happen in a naturalistic context, and then they come back transformed, and darker emotions can start to enter into the piece. So whereas I think in a musical, songs always have to move the story forward, in Narvik sometimes they do, but sometimes they're there to heighten the atmosphere, to let the audience in on emotions that the characters are experiencing, or to remind us of certain points in Jim's life, certain memories.
Yeah, so in a sense it is a musical. There are songs there that do relate to the characters and they relate to the story.
Oh yeah, definitely, they all do. They all intensify the experience as well. I think one reason that things get classed as a musical can be the tone and the style of it. People have a certain expectation, and we have got lots of movement in this play, but there aren't any dance routines. No,
I know sometimes people shrink away from the title musical if it's something serious, because people do expect the big song and dance routine type musical, but the musical format can encompass quite a lot, really, can't it?
Yeah, it really can. There are a lot of options for how you use music in theatre, and I've been really fascinated by that for years and feel really lucky to have got to explore that with Hannah. And it can, just be a matter of taste in a way, that people assume that a musical sits in a certain category, the way it looks and feels and the size of the cast. So I think a play with songs, better communicates what we're doing with this intense studio play. Yeah,
so there's lots of people who say, I don't like musicals, but I like that one.
Yeah, I think most people do like musicals when they're pushed to explore that. Yeah, when I start to think about what musicals I actually do like, the list gets quite long.
Yeah. But they're, and you've got a background in folk music and a singer yourself. Has that influenced the style of this? Because there is a tradition of working class plays with folk songs. Has there been any theatrical influence to the style of this, or is it just based on your background in many different types of performance?
I think there are a lot of great companies that do brilliant things with music. I'm going to have to think of them off the top of my head. Sound and Fury are an amazing company that dedicate themselves entirely to exploring ways of using music and sound design in theatre. And all theatre, all good theatre uses sound and music in an interesting way. That's something I've always been really drawn to, actually, that you get to tell stories in an audio way as well as a visual way in theatre. And it's only really been about pushing that even further. But I do really like plays like Close the Coal House Door. Yeah, that's definitely an example of a play drawing on existing folk songs in that case, to sort of mix naturalism with something a little bit more magical, I suppose.
Yeah, you've said you're influenced by the sea as a metaphor, like many other writers have been, but here we've got the frozen sea, which I suppose is an even bigger threat. And you've got stories about people who are supposed to be enemies who are coming together against the elements, against nature, in a sense, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. And from our first conversations, me and Hannah, when we were kind of devising the play, we realised that the Arctic convoys are actually a part of World War II that a lot of people don't necessarily know about. It's a really good World War II that immediately springs to mind, so that felt like a good reason to start exploring it. And yeah, the levels of danger and risk that these men were living through were incredible, really. The death rate for those men is really high. And it kind of sums it up when you realise that if anyone fell off a boat in the Arctic, there was no attempt to pick them up because the water was so cold. There was an assumption they'd be dead almost immediately. So yeah, they were incredibly brave, those men. And I was also quite interested in how ordinary it became for them to live that strange life for years.
Yeah, it's amazing how people grow to see things as normal that the rest of the world just would see as really strange and harrowing, really, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and it was really fascinating talking to my grandfather about his war and the mix of stories. He could tell me really positive stories. He remembers glorious moments. He was part of the convoy that brought the Crown Prince Olav back to Norway after the occupation of Norway ended. The King and the Prince had been hiding out in London, given safe harbour, and he was on one of those boats that was bringing the Prince back, and he remembers the people rowing out into the Oslo fjord and holding their hands out for bread, actually, because they were starving. But that being a really clear, exciting, glorious, triumphant moment for him. And then he also told really horrific stories about being on a ship that was bombed and having to follow an order to close off one of the lower decks that was flooding so the water wouldn't spread through the ship. But there were still men on those decks and they were banging on the pipes to be let out, and obviously those men drowned. And he once told me about having to shovel bodies out of a ship as well after it had been hit, and how he'd actually volunteered to do that because he felt like he could cope with it, whereas other people couldn't. So I think actually it was the strange contrasts between feeling like you're on the right side and feeling purposeful and feeling the incredible excitement of that, and then sort of the dark complexity, the moral complexity of war, how those two things existed alongside each other.
You had a series of stories, as you said, from your grandfather and some other World War II sailors. But how do you take a series of anecdotes and make a play out of that?
It was really about allowing myself the freedom to write fiction. I think it was about connecting the research with the themes that we wanted to explore. So in addition to me talking a lot to my grandfather, me and Hannah did an awful lot of reading. There are loads of accounts of men who sailed in the Arctic during that war. So we were kind of connecting. And then when we were really clear about wanting to explore themes of memory and identity and the difficulty of knowing who you are until the moment of crisis, it was really about using those real accounts as a jumping off point and then, filling in the gaps with fiction. And when you're trying to write characters, you always have to enter into fiction. You never really know the minute details. You have to kind of take a leap as a writer to find that.
Yeah, it sounded like it was a very collaborative process. It wasn't just you shut away as a writer, writing a script and passing it to a director. Yeah,
definitely. Early on in the process, it was really collaborative. We did a 10-minute version of the piece for the Every Word Festival, which is the Everyman's yearly new writing festival. And the challenge for that was to write a 10-minute play with songs. So I wrote a couple of scenes and a song, and all of that material has remained in some way in the final play. And we also used Joe Shipman, brilliant actor, who's still our central actor. He plays the main character of Jim. So it's really nice that we've had that continuity right through from that first 10-minute version. And then we did a week's workshop in the Liverpool Playhouse quite a while after that, working with actors, getting the 3 musicians together. And I think at the end of that week, we did maybe 50 minutes in front of an audience of friends and kind of showcased the material and got feedback. So all that was amazing. It is great as a writer to be so collaborative and to lean on other people's talent and ideas. And obviously Hannah, the director, was really instrumental in all of that. But there does always come a point when you have to go away and sit on your own in a room and deal with it yourself as well. Yeah. So after all the research and all that development, I did have to do that and put different ideas into a solid hour and a half in the theatre. But it's always collaborative, because then we went into the rehearsal process in 2015 and the script kept changing through that. And obviously the music was largely written in that period as well. And now we're in rehearsal again for the tour, and there's still changes being made to the script. And I actually really enjoy that sense of development and responding to other people.
Yeah, it's nice to get out sometimes when you're a writer, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I think with the show being in rehearsals, you feel like that's actually a playwright's job, to be in that rehearsal room and interacting with people. It is a really important part of the job, that you get both sides of it, the introverted side, sitting alone, and then the more extrovert side, where you get to actually meet people.
Yeah. Well, you've got quite a long history with the Everyman and Playhouse. It's nearly 10 years now since your first play, Intemperance, was produced by the Everyman and shortlisted for the Mayor Whitworth Award. And you've been pretty busy in those 10 years, haven't you? How do you think being a writer is for you now as a career?
It's great. I've never really thought in terms of career. I've always just had lots of things I wanted to do. It's always about the next idea that won't leave me alone, the next story that I'm really compelled to write. And if I run out of them, then I'll stop. And it's also once you get going, there can be a lovely momentum that comes from other people. Back to what we were saying about collaboration. I've been really lucky to meet key people who've connected with what I do, and then I've connected with their amazing talents as well. People like Suzanne Bell, who was the literary manager at the Everyman for many years. She really got me started as a writer by having faith in me. She taught me a tremendous amount. And then Lindsay Rodden, who is the dramaturg on Narvik, who was also literary officer at the Everyman and Playhouse for a long time. So I think when you've got people who are urging you on and encouraging you to come up with more ideas, it becomes a lot easier to find some momentum as a writer.
So how did you start as a writer?
I wrote my very first play as a student and entered it for a student playwriting competition, and we took a student show of that up to Edinburgh, and I was in it. We had a great time. So as soon as I came back to Liverpool after that, I joined the Young Writers Programme at the Everyman, which was run by Suzanne Bell, who I mentioned. And that really was the start of it. It's an amazing programme that still runs now, kind of runs through the academic year, and everyone in the group has to write a full-length play, and we share those plays and get feedback with each other. So really, it was the making of me. It was really disciplined. I learned a huge amount about contemporary playwriting, which is really important, because you've got to know what you're entering into, the kind of conversation of plays that's already out there, and where you might want to fill the gaps and add to that conversation. So, that was the start of it, really, for me.
So you're still part of that group even 10 years on?
Sorry, no, I'm saying we aren't. I still keep in touch with a lot of those, a real significant number of those people continue to write and have professional productions afterwards, and the group continues. That's what I meant. It's now been going for over a decade, and they have new writers every year. And there's so many great Liverpool writers that have come through that group now. It's really impressive.
Yeah. Do you feel yourself being part of a long tradition of Liverpool playwrights? Because there is quite an impressive tradition of playwrights from Liverpool, isn't there? Yeah,
there really is. Obviously, Willie Russell, Alan Bleasdale, and Jimmy McGovern, who's more of a screenwriter. And a lot of others, like lesser known people, if you start to look, who've done incredible work. People like Esther Wilson, Tony Green. I got to work with both of them on a play called Unprotected in 2006, which was a co-written verbatim play. There are another couple of people who I learned a massive amount from at an early stage. And I think at the Everyman and Playhouse in Liverpool, there's been a real resurgence of new plays and new writers because there's been such a big focus from those theatres on commissioning new work. People like Lawrence Wilson, who's written loads of great plays at this stage. His career was given a really big boost by the theatres at that point. I particularly feel lucky to have been from uni just as all that was kicking off in Liverpool, where I'm from, and being able to connect with that scene in a way.
You've done a lot of work for radio as well. Does your work in theatre and radio, does it feed into each other, or are they just very different things?
I think the ideas definitely feed into each other. They're very different forms. And I think once I worked out how different they were, I was much better at writing radio. I think radio's got a lot more in common with TV and film, with screenwriting, even though you obviously don't have the visual. The structure of storytelling is very similar. Radio script, you've probably got loads of different, very short scenes in lots of different locations. You might have a big cast where you've got characters who are extras, who just hear them once and then they disappear. And all that can work on radio and similarly can work on screen, whereas theatre really does have its own set of rules, as a live medium, and you tend to be working with longer scenes because you want to keep the tension going for longer. You don't want to have to put the lights down and bring it up again. You tend to be thinking about how to minimise set, and with Narvik we keep all the performers on stage all the time, and that really adds to the intensity, adds to the concentration of the actors and the concentration of the audience, and feels really powerful. So there's definitely overlap when I'm thinking about themes and I'm thinking about characters and story in a broad sense. But when it comes down to how to actually put that story across, it's a really different job on stage than on radio.
Yeah, you don't have to actually build the sets though on radio, do you? You can leave it to the audience's imagination. Yeah,
you can go anywhere. You can have a helicopter by having a helicopter sound, which is amazingly freeing. But I think radio works really well as naturalism in that way. Whereas actually I think on stage you're only ever doing naturalism to a certain degree, and the really exciting thing with Narvik is kind of moving between naturalism and something much stranger, something more theatrical in a way.
Yeah, you seem to be constantly busy. I've been sent a list of things that you've got coming up very soon. What have you got coming up next after Narvik opens?
It's a really busy year. Things have just collided slightly in the first half of this year, which is very exciting. I've got a play on at the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester in April, which has been a collaboration with Ukrainian director Tamara Tronova. I've been over to Ukraine, to Kiev, for a week researching that and working with her on ideas, and also done a lot of talking to the Ukraine community in Manchester, sort of first, second, third generation people there. And I'm still writing the script, but it's getting there. We're doing something, again, really non-naturalistic. It's all set in quite a dark fairy tale world. There's lots of traditional songs within it, Ukrainian songs and Russian songs. And it's also exploring identity. So there is quite a link to Narvik in a way, but the style of it is quite separate. But yeah, it's looking at the current conflict in Ukraine and the kind of clash of Russian and Ukrainian identity and how people there now are trying to navigate that. And then in May, I've got a new play with songs called The Sum at the Liverpool Everyman. And that's part of the new rep company season. And I don't know if you've heard about that they've got a rep company for the first time since the 70s. It's so exciting. There's 14 actors who are doing all 5 plays for the next 6 months in the Everyman, including my piece. We got started a couple of weeks ago learning the songs. We had a day, myself and Vidar Norheim again, who I often work with, who's the musical director on the project, and then all the actors. We sang for a whole day, and it was brilliant to start hearing the voices and connecting the music with the story. And that's about a woman called Eve in Toxteth in contemporary Liverpool who's just about holding the maths of her life together, and then a couple of key things go wrong. Her partner loses his job and her hours are cut. She's on a 0 hours contract, and then the the sums start to crumble. She can't quite make it add up anymore. So it's about austerity, and it's about family and about community. So it's a gritty play, but it's also a big warm-hearted play. And again, the songs add a little bit of magic.
Narvik by Lizzy Nunnery opens at Home Manchester from the 31st of January to the 4th of February 2017, before touring to Stahl Theatre in Oundle, Theatre by the Lake in Keswick, Marlowe Theatre in Canterbury, Mumford Theatre at Anglia Ruskin University in Cambridge, Theatre Severn in Shrewsbury, Mac in Birmingham, Clwyd Theatre Cymru in Mould, York Theatre Royal, the Unity at the Bluecoat in Liverpool, the Met in Bury, the Carriageworks in Leeds, and Harrogate Theatre, before ending at New Diorama Theatre in London from the 21st to the 25th of March. For more information, see www.boxoftrickstheatre.co.uk. You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.